for the next session. It's number one. It's not really working, is it? Let's try another one. A security perspective on water. So this is supposed to become more interactive. We have a panel discussion up here, and I will in a minute ask my panelists to give a brief presentation of their views of their topics. And afterwards we will have the opportunity to discuss freely between the audience and the panelists up here, and I wouldn't mind if the panelists have contradicting opinions and they would argue with each other. This would make for a lively debate. This is what I'm basically looking for. We started off the day with a very big picture on many issues related to water. And I must say I would like to commend the OSCE for undertaking this effort for having the Water Security Day today. I think this is a very good and timely exercise. And it also meets with a trend that I observe, that water is moving up slowly but gradually on international foreign policy and security agendas. So OSCE is right in the middle of this trend. Where there is abundance, there is peace and happiness. And where there is scarcity, there's competition, there's tension and perhaps conflict. I'm not sure if it's true. Where there's abundance, there's perhaps a wasting of resources. Something's taken for granted, but not valued. And where there's scarcity, there's perhaps efficient use, a thought for sustainability, and perhaps an incentive for cooperation. So there are always two ways at looking at abundance and scarcity, but definitely scarcity is one of the most important words of today when we talk about water. And I'm very eager to hear and learn more on what our panelists will have to say on this issue. And I would like to invite the first speaker in this panel. It's the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Tajikistan, Parviz Davlatzoda, who is sitting right next to me to present his paper. He is a career diplomat, and he has been working both in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs back home in Dushanbe, and also with the Shanghai Organization for Security Cooperation in Asia. And I would now like to give the floor to you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, due to his prior commitments, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Tajikistan, His Excellency Sirijin Aslov, will not be able to join us today, and therefore allow me to present his vision on this subject. At the outset, I would like to thank the Secretary General Lamberto Zanier, Swiss OSCE Chairmanship, and Office of the Coordinator for Economic and Environmental Activities for hosting this very important event on the role of OSCE in water security. I am sure that today's event provides a good platform to exchange the views on water security, focus on establishing sustainable water partnership and dialogue, and discuss future role of the OSCE in the water diplomacy. Before we move into discussion about the role of OSCE can play in this complicated process, let's take our time and recall the main events that took place in the sphere of water cooperation, as well as remind ourselves of the main challenges in this direction. As you know, the last year has passed under the auspices of the International Year of Water Cooperation. During this period, successfully we have carried out not only all the activities foreseen by United Nations General Assembly Resolution 67/204, but also more than 5,000 international, regional and national activities in support of effective implementation of the International Year of Water Cooperation. In addition, the International Year of Water Cooperation coincides with the first year of the intergovernmental process for the implementation of the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, Rio+20. It is gratified that after the debate of working groups, the problems of achieving sustainable management of water resources became a central topic. Another important result of the year may include the growing awareness that the solution in the field of water resources should be based on scientific data. Effective mechanism for scientific exchange, joint observation and research can contribute to strengthening of water cooperation and will be useful while taking well-balanced decisions. This interaction is especially relevant today when the negative impact of climate change on the hydrological cycle and water resources is observed in many regions of the world. It is known that due to population and economic growth, demand and competition for water between different sectors, countries is also increases. And intersectoral competition for water resources on the condition of growing water scarcity can lead to negative consequences even within the same country. Moreover, in the coming decades, water management may be challenged more through expected climate change and socio-economic developments. Effects of climate change in the world indicate a growing shortage of water, which is likely to have a devastating impact on the economies and could lead to escalating conflicts over water. Another water management issue of great concern for the countries of Central Asia is the fate of the Aral Sea, which once was the world's fourth largest island body of water and an abundant source of fish, has become a catastrophe. Starting from 1916, growing consumption due primarily to increased irrigation has diverted considerable water from Amudarya and Sirdarya tributary streams. As a result, decreased inflows have exacerbated natural evaporation. Currently, countries of the region implementing different programs and projects directed towards improving of socio-economic and ecological situation in their respective countries. Undoubtedly, strengthening the role of the regional and national agencies on water and environmental management is very important for the implementation of these programs and projects. Distinguished colleagues, I would like to point out on the lesson learned from the previous dialogues on water cooperation, which seems an important one. The universal formula for successful water cooperation does not exist. The effective mechanism of water cooperation are being created by means of consistent and sustainable efforts and contributions of all parties concerned. The engagement of all stakeholders in building and strengthening water cooperation and partnership is a key for successful implementation of commitments. Promoting nexus approach to water resources would accelerate implementation process and would facilitate the achievement of sustainable water resources management. In addition, using mechanism of water cooperation and water diplomacy can contribute to developing water partnership and implementation of integrated and comprehensive water management practice. There is a need to consider gender aspect of water problems as well. That is to say, we should actively involve women in the development process by strengthening the role of women in the management and protection of water resources. All our plans, programs, and action should be accompanied by adequate financial resources and advanced technologies. Important vector of joint efforts could be cooperation in the spheres of education and culture of sustainable water use and consumption. Transboundary water cooperation component plays a central role in ensuring place stability and development, and it is expected the competition for water will become more acute and tensions grow between different groups of users. Therefore, coastal states should be strengthen dialogue and cooperation and take necessary measures for mutually beneficial and sustainable use of transboundary water resources on the basis of recognized norms and principles. It is possible for parties with different interests capitalize on water resources with a special agreement, taking into account the characteristic of the basin. Furthermore, we believe that transboundary water cooperation should be based on regional and international agreements and should be used among countries, including through existing mechanism and condition of water diplomacy. There is a consensus among the majority of coastal states that transboundary agreements must be specific and must outline the institutional mechanism for cooperation and measures for the management and protection of water resources and related ecosystems. Gradual and consistent implementation of integrated water resources management at the river basin and groundwater system is crucial to meet the social, environmental, and economic needs in an equitable manner. Governments of transboundary river basin should take appropriate measures to support the monitoring of water resources and information network among all the river basins. Position for joint monitoring, information sharing, and public participation, as well as mutual assistance in case of emergency events, is also crucial. Dear participants, managing water resources to prevent conflicts, making full use of existing multilateral tools to maintain and enhance regional security should be among key topics of OSCE. In our view, the OSCE, with its great potential as well as is due to its expertise on environmental security linkages and its comprehensive approach in conflict prevention, well placed in strengthening water security. OSCE could shift the emphasis of regional security to confront issues of water management, which is challenge for regional cooperation. Issues of water security have risen to the forefront of public debate. Disputes over water derive from Soviet practice and Central Asia's inability to find a basis for cooperation. Water issues may develop over time as the primary source of interstate conflict in Central Asia. Consequently, disputes between upstream and downstream states have become perennial. Demand in water will intense and predicted to increase in the near future in the OSCE area. This trend will be accompanied by a number of negative political factors: poor water management, proposal for future water extraction, tension in interstate relations, and sporadic but low-level violence at the communal level. Taking into account that transboundary water resources are of special importance to the OSCE as a regional security organization, it can further provide its mediation capacities in cooperation and compromise in managing and sharing transnational water resources. Through such means, the OSCE can facilitate efforts of participating states to optimize water use efficiency and maximize effort to restore and protect key water-related ecosystems. Also, the OSCE is making progress in identifying and taking advantage of opportunities for water cooperation. Still much more needs to be done. In Central Asia countries are taking steps towards collective water management. However, we can define it as slow and uneven process. Unfortunately, the most crucial problems remain formidable and largely unresolved. It is important to mention the deterioration of the existing irrigation infrastructure, the continued economic reliance on irrigation, agriculture, and demographic growth suggests the region's water security environmental will continue in this stance. It is therefore much appreciated the OSCE efforts in provision of the know-how concerning the legal basis of international river basins and the organization of water management. It is believed the organization should concentrate also in support of countries' efforts from shifting alleviation of the symptoms to reform of the fundamental cause, irrigation agriculture. We should also take into account a great potential of civil society in environmental protection area. Thus, to provide water security, the OSCE can further explore and increase support for civil society activities in general and those related to the agriculture and environmental sectors in particular. We believe also that water security today needs to be high on the political agenda. It is crucial to establish mechanisms which would benefit both upstream and downstream countries, as well as countries with very low water resources. Taking this opportunity, I commend again OSCE efforts in enhancing water cooperation in Central Asia region through organizing workshops gathering policy and decision makers, legal and technical experts, and think tanks from various Eastern and Western Europe, including Caucasus. This approach helps us to learn about the experiences of other countries in solving disputable issues. Dear colleagues, we strongly support the initiatives of important international organizations, including the United Nations and the other developed countries with regard to developing of environmentally friendly and renewable energy sources, which are the basis of the green economy. Along with that, we pay utmost attention to further provide people of the country who greatly suffer from electricity shortages during wintertime with electricity and heating through existing and introduction of new facilities, including construction of new power transmission lines, efficient use of electricity, reduction of losses, use of renewable energy technologies, as well as the efficient water management resources in the region. In conclusion, I would like to confirm that Tajikistan will remain loyal to all ancient traditions, customs, and friendly coexistence of Central Asian people. With this purpose in mind, conducting friendly policy, non-interference into the international affairs to each other, using diplomatic and political methods for solving disputable issues, such as hydroenergy and water management, shall fully prevail in our cooperation with bordering countries. Allow me once again to express my gratitude to organizers of this conference and wish you a most successful and fruitful discussion today. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Minister, for this comprehensive statement. In your remarks, you made a reference to ongoing United Nations processes. You mentioned the elaboration of Sustainable Development Goals, where water will certainly play an important role. And you made reference to the International Year of Water Cooperation, an initiative by the country of Tajikistan, for which we are very grateful. Then you pointed out that there are a number of reasons, growing demand, population, economic growth, why water could become a controversial issue in international relations. And then you carried on by, in a way, describing an ideal path to transboundary cooperation by naming some conditions how such transboundary water cooperation could succeed and could make progress. However, you also pointed out that water and scarcity of water has the potential to become a major source of conflict, especially in Central Asia. And you encouraged OSCE and other international fora to take a lead role here and to place water very high on their agenda. And I hope that OSCE colleagues listened, that you got a full list of tasks to work upon for the next years. I would now like to call upon the next speaker. It's Lucas Beck, sitting on my left. He is a real expert. He's the one who studied the subject, international relations and hydrology. He's working in Switzerland, where he's providing information, consulting, I suppose, and also doing project management in the field of water infrastructure. And I'm very eager to hear what you have to tell us.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for welcoming me here. I have to apologize. I just realized that I'm the only one not wearing a tie. My speech will be much shorter than the one just before, so I hope you don't blame me for that. So I have 5 points that I want to stress out here from, let's say, not a policy point of view, or I'm not a politician also, but more from a scientific point of view. My first point is, I think I view that the risk for water conflict is definitely increasing. So if you look, for example, to the 90s with the falling apart of USSR, if you look at the struggles we had in Yugoslavia or just now in the Crimean Peninsula, we have with each falling apart of countries or with each new border, we have new water basins that need a new agreement or needs to be shared between two different countries. So this fragmentation of our political landscape is definitely increasing the risk for water conflict as we have more and more stakeholders. Then also what I think is important for increased risk is environmental pressure. It's not only climate change, but also increasing population pressure, increasing construction activities that also stress the watersheds and the water resource per se. And then, of course, we have socio-economic development, people who need more and more food, who consume more and more meat, with also contradicts or is in, let's say, in competition with higher energy needs. So we have, on the one hand, we have higher food requirements, higher irrigation needs, but also more energy requirements, which also will increase the risk for water conflict. But then, and that's my second point, I am sure that opportunities for better cooperation are here. So one of my most prominent examples, I don't know if it's completely true or not, but during the 6 Days Wars in the 60s, no one was talking to each other anymore, but experts continued to talk about water and about how to share their rivers. So I think everyone is aware that water is very important and that we need to continue negotiate about that. I think opportunities are also here for better cooperation because we have a lot of innovation in data sharing. So today you don't need to go to measure the scales in individual rivers anymore, but you can do it with remote sensing or based on even your cell phone. You can take a picture and send it to a data center, and you get much more information that is much easier accessible for all the stakeholders and makes it also better for joint decision. Then I think also that what is increasing cooperation, we have more and more international and also other water organizations that raise the awareness of the importance of water. My third point is that we need to address more separately demand and supply questions. So we cannot blame everything on changing the changing environment, but also we have to talk about how to share demands, how to maybe give up a little bit of the individual sovereignty needs so that different countries share their demands better together and also can share like that better the available supplies. My fourth important point is about climate change. So if I look to the landscape and discussions that are going on, climate change is in each mouth. Everyone is talking about climate change and saying how important that is with regard to the future of our water resources. If you read the last IPCC report about climate change, there were two parts. One part, the more scientific one, was a kind of saying that climate change or our knowledge about climate change is less good than we thought first, and that it may be less pronounced in certain areas. So let's say the scientific part of the IPCC report was a kind of relaxing the biggest fears about climate change. But then in the policy part again, it says even though maybe climate change is not that severe, we need to be more and more pragmatic. I think if we have climate change or not in this magnitude as we fear, I think it's all depending on the willingness of the different stakeholders and different countries to negotiate and to also find solutions. So it's not only about availability of water and water scarcity, but also about individual willingness. So maybe my last point, what do I see for opportunities for OSCE? I think OSCE needs to be much more practical in terms of also providing guidelines or tools on how to resolve all the different types of water conflicts. This could be a kind of a cookbook style or also a platform that brings together the different stakeholders. I think that OSCE could really make a big mark for themselves also if they engage more in water resources. And I think also OSCE proved that they are strong in confidence building measures, and this is also very much needed for water diplomacy and water cooperation.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Lucas, for your statement. We just briefly summarized the 5 points. You said first, the risk of conflict over water is certainly rising or has risen in the past. Secondly, you say, but there are also opportunities for better and perhaps more constructive cooperation on water issues. You mentioned the importance of sharing water supplies, certainly. You made a very good point about climate change. And allow me to reframe it. You're saying, let's not only look at climate change as something that's falling on our heads, but we have the will, if we want to act and act accordingly to find a solution as well. And your last point was you also gave your wish list to the OSCE and asked them to come up with a cookbook or toolbox or other practical helps and guidelines that could solve and prevent water problems, water crisis from coming up. Thank you so much. My next speaker is also not wearing a tie, I should point out. So Lucas is not the only one. Is Jaana Husu-Kallio. She's permanent secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry in Finland and also chairperson of the Finnish party of the joint Finnish-Russian Commission on the Utilization of Frontier Waters. It's a very long title, that's why I have to read it up here. But it's a very practical part of work you're dealing with Russia in terms of water cooperation, sharing of water resources. And perhaps I should make a last point and say that you studied a trained veterinarian. Thank you.
So Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, I also have some links still to the academic world, so I would say that you have the academic freedom. That's why you are not wearing the tie, so it's not surprising at all. But first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting Finland to take part in this conference. I'm very happy and proud to be here. And from the historical perspective point of view, as you know, in 1966, the International Law Association adopted the main principles of international water law as the so-called Helsinki rules. And in 1970, it was Finland that made an initiative to the United Nations General Assembly that the rules for international watercourses should be further developed and codified. In 1997, which now finally enter force this August. And the audience, I'm quite sure that you also know that the Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses and International Lakes of 1992 was signed in Helsinki, and therefore it is known as the Helsinki Convention. So what I want to emphasize on behalf of my country is that water issues can be a field of cooperation and diplomacy. And that is why we very warmly welcome the seminar and the title of it. Although, of course, the views, the aspects from different parts of the world may differ, as we heard this morning from the excellent key speaker, your Royal Highness, and the availability of the water resources which indeed vary from my country, as it was mentioned, Sweden, the Nordic countries, compared to the more southern parts of the world. What is the availability of water per capita, for instance. But a few words about Finland and the transboundary work, especially linked to our cooperation with Russia, as mentioned by the chairman. But we share water courses with 3 neighbors, Sweden, Norway and Russia. And we have a border of 1,300 kilometers with Russia. We have 19 watersheds between our countries, and the cooperation has lasted for 50 years. Actually, it is an anniversary. So the cooperation started by signing the agreement in 1964. So we celebrate really 50 years anniversary this year. And the area has changed during the decades quite a lot, starting from flood risk management, hydroelectronic power sources on both sides of the border, to water protection, to transport, to multi-purpose management of water levels, and even fisheries. So it's a very wide scope nowadays. But as a lesson to be learned, and perhaps the main message for you to this seminar, is that we have had during these decades a very pragmatic approach. And that is why we have the cooperation based on the work of a joint commission. In the agreement, it is written that if no general understanding is found in the joint commission, it can be forwarded to the governmental, to the political level. But during the 50 years, not a single case has been needed. So I think it describes very well that this has been really policy-oriented work, although, you know, the history has changed quite a lot from Soviet Union to Russian Federation, but we have been able to handle the issues in a very professional way, which I can say on behalf of Finland we are very, very proud of. So perhaps my key message to you is that instead of elaborating a very precise water courses agreement, it might be much more important to have a very low threshold for initiating discussions and practical collaboration under a very joint transboundary cooperation framework. And as we heard already this morning, what I also liked very much is that from our experience we can say that it is really useful to have a step-by-step approach, not to try to solve all the problems from the beginning. It needed several decades for our countries to make the progress. It started from solving the organizational arrangements, of course. It started, as I told you, about the issues of hydropower and avoiding the flood damages. But it has moved more to the principles and to the methodologies for monitoring, for instance, the quality of water. And indeed, as mentioned by Lucas, by you, how are we going to tackle together the challenges of the climate change? From our area, it's more how the nature will change linked to ice conditions, melting of ice, shorter snow periods, less ever spring floods, but more rain in autumn. So it's a totally different area we are talking about perhaps in the future. And more ecological points. Even the issue of endangered species like the endangered Saimaa seal and even the salmon issues linked to fishery. So there's a huge amount of work ahead which we are trying to solve with this very, very pragmatic approach. That's why we have working groups on water resources management and water protection, which also meet on a regular basis, not only the annual meeting of the Joint Commission, which is working very well indeed. But to share the good practices, I think, is something that we want to take part with you, and I think that this cooperation between Finland and Russia can be a benchmark perhaps by some other nations on regional level as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaana. Just briefly summarizing, you pointed out that your country has been playing a leading role in terms of water diplomacy for quite some time and has been instrumental in bringing about the Helsinki Convention, which is one of the crucial instruments that we have today. You pointed out that basically you are in close cooperation with your three neighbors on shared water resources and giving us some insight into the practical cooperation between Finland and Russia, which has developed over time, over decades, I must say, starting from humble, modest beginnings to becoming apparently a body that's covering also highly sophisticated issues and covering a very broad range of subjects. And so far, without any hiccups for 50 years, it has never been necessary to call upon the political level, which I find is very impressive. And certainly very important to take the lessons that you have learned there, step-by-step approach, take it slowly, and I also like the low threshold, this discussion that you mentioned. Do not wait for the big things to come up, but already start with the discussion of the smaller issues because they're also important in the end. Just a small comment from my side here. Perhaps it's also has been good for Finland that you had a time to wait until the cooperation has evolved, but there are some river basins where we do not have time today, and this is certainly an unfortunate aspect. Let's now come to the last speaker of this panel. It's Lifeng, who is sitting on my right. He is director of the Freshwater program for the WWF International. He has been working with WWF since 2008. And what I find very interesting, and perhaps he's saying a few words about it, is that Lifeng is also board member of the Delta Alliance, an international knowledge-driven network organization with the mission of improving the resilience of the world's deltas. Deltas are one of the critical areas on this planet, but Lifeng, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished guests. First, please let me thank the organizer to invite WWF, invite myself to join this very interesting and important discussion. I think a lot have been said, and I probably want to contribute to three ideas from my personal perspective. The first one, I think we discussed a lot about water security from the social, from the economic perspective. I think there's also gradually more recognition about the water security from the environment or from the ecological perspective. If you remember in the final text of Rio Plus 20 conference, the final text, The Future We Want, does recognize the roles of ecosystems in terms of maintaining water quality and water quantity. And it also suggests that water should be fully integrated into the three dimensions of sustainable development. I think that's very, very important discussion, very, very important dimensions that's when we talk about the water security. And that's not surprisingly, you probably could link that idea with what we have been doing in WWF. Because in WWF, our core mission is to try to build a future that people can live in harmony with nature. And if you look at the rivers, probably less in Europe, but in the rest of the world, when rivers couldn't reach to the sea, then we have a huge water security challenge, both for the people, for the species living in the rivers, but also especially for the economy and communities living in the downstream areas. So that's why WWF has been very active to promote the ideas like environmental water requirement, like environmental flows, and work with the government like in Mexico, in China, in East Africa countries, how the environmental dimension could be fully incorporated in the water resource management. And through that collaboration, we have been seeing that environmental flows now have much widely accepted and incorporated in the policy frameworks, like in China, in the river basin management plans, like in Mexico, in the water reserves, that's CONAGUA defined in the past few years. And also there's a similar requirement in Europe, try to keep all the rivers in the good ecological status. And from that perspective, we do need to look at the ecological perspective of the water security. The second one, I think the previous speaker, Madam Jaana, already mentioned the UN Water Convention, the New York Convention. And the WWF has been promoting this convention since 2007. And at that time, we have 15 parties recognize the convention. But over years, and that's more countries recognize this convention, ratify this convention. The last ratification was done in May by Vietnam, which brings the convention 35 parties in May, and then the convention will be entering into force in August. It is important because if you look at the world map, that's more than 148 countries. They have at least the territory that's within one or more transponder rivers. And the transponder rivers over the world, in fact, they host the population of more than 40% of the world population. They host more than 60% of the freshwater flows. And those more than 260 transponder rivers is the very important part, or probably the most important part when it comes to water resource management. And in lack of global architecture, it is challenging to secure the water security in that perspective. So that's why we think to promote such global architecture is crucial, important. The third I want to bring into this discussion is some of the reflections or perspectives from the private sector. And at WWF, we have been working with the private sector in the past 5 or 6 years. Probably you also noticed that the World Economic Forum also launched a report which recognized the water is the number 3 risk to the business. And nowadays, the private sector, I think they have a much more awareness about the key water risk they are facing. And they started really to look at what the private sector can do. So use that opportunity, WWF has been working with lots of companies, try to help them to understand better the water risk they're facing, both the physical risk, but also regulation risks, but also potentially the reputational and economic risk to the private sector. We created, with other partners, we created the water risk filter tool, which is an open access tool online that the companies, anybody can use that tool to do a quick assessment of the key water risks. And then we also develop a suite of tools that can help the companies to implement some of the resolutions to reduce their water risks. But more important, we want to bring the private sector into the conversation like happening at the moment. Bring them into broadly the water resources management to see how the private sector can do something not only within their plants, not only within their factories, but also broadly with the community like this, how they can be part of the solutions to really to understand the water risk, but also play their part, because towards water security is a sort of common shared responsibility of everyone in this world. So we can say that's increasing good water stewardship happening here and there, and there's a huge opportunity to bring the private sector in the water resource management in the future. So probably I want to make this contribution at the moment. I look forward to the interesting discussion with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee, for these 3 quite distinct points, I believe. Let me just briefly sum them up. One is that you stress the fact that it's important always to include ecological and environmental aspect when we talk about water security and water cooperation, and you made a reference to the Future We Want document that concluded the Rio +20 summit 2 years ago. Your second point was that you stressed that the WWF is promoting and supporting the Watercourse Convention as a key legal instrument that could help bring about water cooperation. And actually, I'm happy to say, while I see Daniel Guade sitting in the back row, that the European Union also formally issued a statement, the Council conclusions last year, saying that the EU is also promoting the Watercourse Convention and the UNECE Convention as a part of a governance that should help bring about more effective water diplomacy. So NGO and government organizations working hand in hand is always a good outcome. And your third point, which I find particularly interesting, is that you said you see a clear role for the private sector here. Private sector should be part of the solution, and you mentioned that the World Economic Forum called water as being the third biggest or third major risk for business globally. And in this context, and while opening up the floor to the audience, I'm wondering whether the private sector is represented here today and whether the private sector would like to come forward and make a statement on this issue, which I find very interesting, as we have NGO and GO sitting up here. There's a private sector person here. I forgot Lucas Beck, you're working for the private sector. So we had these 4 statements. I would now like to open the floor for questions from the audience. I will take 3 questions in a row and then ask panelists to answer them. Please identify yourself, and you're the first one.
Hello, good morning. I am the Spanish ambassador to OSCE, Jorge Domecq. Thank you very much for your interventions. I would like to, first of all, thank the Secretary General for organizing this Security Day and also for the chairmanship to push the issue of water as an essential aspect of our second dimension. And also I'm very happy to see that it will be one of the priorities of the next chairmanship of the OSCE next year. Now, when we look at water and its relation to what OSCE can contribute, it is its relation to security. And here I would like to make two comments. One aspect that I think we forget many times is the relationship of the water to human rights. That means more to the third dimension. No? There with Germany, Spain presented in the UN several resolutions now. I think it must be already 4 or 5 years now for the recognition of the human right to the access to water and sanitation. That has gathered momentum, and I think it is something that we have to reflect upon in the OSCE framework as an area where it is related to security. And that brings me to the second aspect of water related to security, which is the relationship to the communities, both transboundary and within a country. No? If I may say, the experience we have in Spain, intra-regional in the country, has been solving the issue of water management in a holistic manner and with the participation of civil society, regional governments, and all the stakeholders, and also private sector, organizing what we call confederaciones hidrográficas, which are the hydrographic confederations, which really have taken the issue of water off the political agenda because it has given a practical solution to it. And these confederaciones hidrográficas take care of the issue of water from the part of use in irrigation or human consumption, from the point of view of infrastructure with the construction of dams, but also from the point of view of environmental and sustainability, the water management, the quality of water. Now, from a transboundary point of view, if I may say, we have an excellent cooperation with Portugal, where we have several rivers that their basins across our two countries, and we have solved the issue that also had entangled our common relations in the past with a convention that was signed in 1998, the Convention of Albufeira. It's working very well. Also, it has taken it off the bilateral agenda because all the issues are now solved, as our Finnish speaker told us, off the political agenda because it's solved at the more technical. So that gives you an idea of a way ahead. We are very happy to share those experiences with any country in study visits or whatever. Now, I would have in this context, I would have two questions I would like to put forward. One is, if we look at water from a security perspective, what do you think from the OSCE perspective is more important to look at? It's the scarcity, the quantity, or is it the quality? Where do you see more a role for the OSCE? And the second question I would like to put forward is related to what His Royal Highness brought up before, is the lack of a database with information about water. Not only in the OSCE region, but also we should think, I'm thinking more as a Mediterranean country, also looking to the southern rim of the Mediterranean and to our Mediterranean partners. If we could do something in that aspect in the OSCE to try and fill the gap. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your question. Next question, please.
Thank you. I'm from the Portuguese delegation, actually, and I just seize the occasion to build on what the Spanish ambassador has just referred to as our bilateral cooperation in managing the shared river basins. Precisely, we have this document of 1998. It is a very, very comprehensive document, and definitely we are also very happy with the way it is working. Most of the problems are precisely dealt with in a commission, in a technical commission, following precisely this example. It covers a very wide range of areas, from the quality of the waters, prevention of pollution, and also some other mechanisms of early warning concerning exceptional circumstances like floods or droughts. So all in all, we definitely share the assessment that it is a very positive way of dealing with these issues, and we definitely find that the best approach is cooperation. Also, following, I will at the end will have a very similar question to the Spanish ambassador, and would like to hear you more about what would be your ideas of how the OSCE could play a greater role in water diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can take a third question before I give the floor to the panel in order to answer. Yes, Volker Frobert.
Thank you. Volker Frobert, German Agency for International Cooperation. We are implementing the Transboundary Water Management Program in Central Asia on behalf of the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs in partnership with the 5 countries of Central Asia: Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. A particular question to Mr. Davlatzoda, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Tajikistan. Which role do you attribute to regional institutions in this regard? You elaborated very well, I think, on all the challenges that, in principle, all the republics of Central Asia face. But there are, of course, also interesting and positive preconditions set. Right after the independence from Soviet Union, you have concluded a lot of agreements, created a lot of regional institutions. You have water allocation quota on every single river. But of course, these agreements have to be lived. For this, you have respective regional platforms, especially under the roof of the Regional Water Management Organization, IFIS. and which was already with the executive committee, so de facto secretariat, once chaired even by your minister, Aslov. So in this regard, which role do you attribute to this and also to the potential of strengthening these regional organizations to enable them managing new challenges and issues as to water management in Central Asia? Thank you.
Thank you. So we had 3 questions. One was from the Spanish ambassador, should the OSCE rather focus on quantity or quality issues when it comes to water security? And the second part of his question was about a possible database that perhaps OSCE should try to get. And from our Portuguese colleague, again, the question, what kind of ideas and suggestions the panel would have for OSCE engagement on water security, water diplomacy. And the third question, after looking for the role of regional bodies in the view of the colleague from Tajikistan. So who would like to answer first? Lucas?
Maybe I just can say some words about your question regarding the database. I think in Europe we have, or the European Union has a very good framework, the Water Framework Directive, which is quite comprehensive and a good tool to manage water at the European scale. And I think it could be the role of OSCE to connect members of OSCE to this Water Framework Directive, or to connect it a kind of to the European Union or to this model, which seems to me a very good framework. Yes.
Yes, I was going to say about the same thing, and linked to that also, I think it's the European need, and I can say it also in my country's point of view, that the open data is the future for everything. That is for the scientists, where we need more information for the policy making, and I want to also echo what you said from the International WWF point of view, that NGOs and the governments, if we have the common targets, we manage the issue much better. And I forgot to say that also on our experience, including the scientific cooperation is crucial, because there are many issues, and not least linked to the climate change, where we need the academics to be involved. Otherwise, the policy making will not manage. And there I come to the question of the Spanish ambassador, that indeed it is a big package of the security in general, as His Royal Highness said in the beginning. And indeed it is linked to different aspects, and I would dare to say that it's also linked to another human rights issue, and that is food security, because a huge amount of the water is for watering the food for us. So indeed it is a package of many aspects, and I think that this forum is a good example for the platform where we can share the expertise, but also perhaps the practical advice from one to another. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In Central Asia, I can mark, we have good experience. We have commission of regulatory, but maybe the commission, they're not active just now, but we can improve this work in this commission. And also I can confirm that we are ready to any dialogue, consultation, and meeting for all of Central Asia countries about the water security. And also maybe, I think, I'm a lawyer, I think maybe we need to establish the new convention or new agreements, especially in the Central Asia. I think we are ready to continue all dialogues for the downstreams and upstreams countries, and we need to meet every month and every day, and to talk about these issues. Thank you.
I have to apologize. That's coming from China. I know this OSCE very little, so it's difficult for me to talk about what's the role of OSCE in terms of water security, but I want to share a couple of thoughts. The first one about the data sharing, I think there's lots of concerns about data sharing when it comes to share the data, at the regional level or global level. It has a lot to do with, your regulation at different countries regarding data sharing or information management. But interestingly enough, recently I used the Google map, and then I discovered my parents' house. I was born in the rural area of China, which is a very, very small village, in the hill area. And my parents' house, it's like 20 meters long and 5 meters wide. So it's much, much smaller. It's probably like 1/5 of this conference room. But I can find it on the Google map. So nowadays with such advanced technology, anything, what are the things you can hide? It's very, very difficult to hide things, and it's much more convenient to share things, by using this kind of high technology. I think, we should really look at the data sharing and try to work out through the data sharing, through the collaboration, how we can, collectively address the issues. I think probably in that perspective, OSCE can look at not to build the database. I wouldn't stress, to build the database. I think there's lots of database, lots of data is already available. Probably, OSCE can look at the protocols or the mechanisms, how to bring those databases together, how to facilitate the discussion of the data sharing mechanisms rather than build those databases itself. Then when it comes to water quality, water quantity, there's many other perspectives of water resource management, and that's why it's also fascinating to work on the water security issues. When it comes to the role of OSCE, I think it will have to be transparent and inclusive, because even within Europe, in different parts of Europe, you have a different challenge in terms of water quality, or different challenge in other parts of Europe, you have a much more, water security issues much more related to water quantity. So I think it depends on which parts you come from. I think the water security issues on the ground are probably very different from one part of Europe to another. That's why I think, again, the organization like OSCE, it's sort of a platform building, try to make it inclusive, then bring all the relevant issues onto this platform to discuss, to share, and to promote the best practice. I think that would be some role that I think OSCE can play. I apologize again. If anything, I misunderstood the role, please forgive me. Thank you very much.
I think no reason for apologies, was just a perfect answer. Let me just add, OSCE has a very interesting geographical footprint. It comprises, I understand, roughly 150 international river basins, and what I find interesting about them is that there are very varying degrees of cooperation. You have almost perfect schemes along the Danube and the Rhine which work efficiently, or between Finland and Russia, and you have river basins where, let's say, uncharted terrain so far. So there's all kinds of degrees of cooperation and lack of cooperation. And I would think if you can make it anywhere in terms of water diplomacy, water diplomacy, if you can make it anywhere, you can make it in the OSCE area and show good examples and good practices that could also be applied in other parts of this planet. Let's have a next round of questions. I invite people from the floor to come up with comments, suggestions, remarks, questions. While you think about it, I've had some input from the social media side. This is very open, very flexible and cloud-based. One remark, discussions around water conservation tend to focus on actions at national level and sometimes overlook a contribution each person can make on a daily basis. In this regard, what do you think shall be done at the grassroots level? So it's one question. I don't know where it comes from somewhere. And the second question is, that's the fundamental one, how to make world's fresh waters a source for cooperation and not a source of conflict. Any other question you'd like to add to these two that came via Twitter, Facebook, or other media? Okay. The grassroots level, I think it's an interesting one.
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely an interesting question, but it's also, for me, a question of what is changing the game. And I mean, if we look at the grassroots level, yes, well, it's difficult to say what to do to really change the water scarcity or whatever. But I think where we could start there is to look more into, let's say, the trade of also virtual water. So to look where you buy your tomatoes from, where your dates are coming from. So with this you can contribute a lot to water scarcity elsewhere. I mean, in Switzerland we don't have water scarcity, but maybe we contribute to water scarcity in Morocco or in Egypt or wherever, yeah.
I think that we all are aware of the footprints nowadays, including the water footprint. So it's not only an issue on the governmental level, and I guess most of the NGOs active in this field are referring to the water footprint. So each of us can make a decision, not only as the teenagers are. I'm talking from experience, for half an hour in a shower, you know, without any reason. And it's about agriculture. What do we put in our fields? What do we use for watering? It's also about clean tech. How do we recycle the water? So the technique is there. Are we capable and willing to use that? So I think using the issue of measuring the footprints of each of us makes difference. And about the cooperation, I think that all the talks, especially the one in the beginning of the morning, said that it is our, and as you said as well, it's our common shared responsibility. It's our planet, it's our region, it's our country. So I think we in honesty, we should be stupid if we spoiled the case. And everyone knows that we cannot live without water. It's an essential for all of us. It's the basis of our food production, as I mentioned, but also as a source itself. So I think there is no alternative. We have to cooperate on individual cases on a daily way, but also between the countries across the borders.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Hydrosolutions. I am from UNESCO. And you almost made a mistake, which was not a mistake, because you wanted to say water diplomacy, but then coming from your own seat, you said climate diplomacy. It's almost the same, because if you look at climate change, it's all about water. Whether you talk about the accelerating speed of the hydrological cycle, resulting with higher probability floods, and at the same time keep continuity at work, a higher probability of droughts, both in space and time, or you talk about sea level rise, or you talk about the combined effects, or you talk about changing rainfall patterns, you talk about the recharge of aquifers, or you talk about ecosystems, services, and biodiversity. It's all about water. So please, next time, do mix the two, because the water diplomacy is essentially a means that could enrich, hopefully, the discussions on climate change. It's not about trading left, right, and center matters, but it's about water. And what are the adaptation strategies? Lifeng has mentioned that indeed 40% of humanity lives on the 273 shared river basins, and the same number of aquifers, which down the road, when we will have in 35 years' time 9 billion human beings, it's going to be almost the current world population. So this is an issue that needs to be considered, particularly if you look at what happened over the past 35 years, that the per capita water availability has reduced exponentially from the average of 12,000 cubic meter per person in 75 down to 5,000 today. Now, of course, you can't make a linear projection saying that we're running out of water because the hydrological cycle is a cycle. But there is a conflict potential, and the Twitter has asked what can we do to turn potential water conflicts into water cooperation. I think one has to look back at history of humanity and ask the question, how often did it happen that water was a primary cause of any armed conflict? One. And that was 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia between two city-states, Umma and Lagash, who were fighting over irrigation rights for 3 days, happily killing each other. But at the end of the day, they recognized that there is no win-win, because any win-lose situation would lead to a lose-lose. And then they had to come to an agreement. If you look at the past history of armed conflicts and water, you will see that the balance, the overall balance, is moving towards cooperation instead of conflicts. There's a lot of verbal conflicts and name-calling and all the rest of it. But when it comes to the real issues, there is a tendency to cooperate. Why? Because water connects, it doesn't divide. It is very deep down in the human cycle. This is an important element upon which water diplomacy could be built. Thank you.
Thank you for your positive, optimistic statement. Lee.
Yeah, just also contributed to this debate. Thanks to bring the word to water into this discussion. Because if you broaden a little bit the concept of water security, and in fact, it's really water become much more important for collaboration, because nowadays, even look at Switzerland, it's on the top of Europe, it's the water tower of the Europe. It doesn't have a water scarcity issue. However, if you look at the product consumed by Switzerland, in fact, the total water consumed by Switzerland, 80% is coming from the rest of the world. It's coming from India, from Turkey, from East Africa, North Africa, from China, from Pakistan, through the trade. So that's why water security, it's, if we only look at the water resources, or shall we also look at links of the water and the food issues, because food is water, water is food. So that's really comes to the ideas, even we don't need to worry about our water security in Switzerland, but we do need to look at how water and land and other resources has been used in other parts of the world to produce the product that's we consume in Switzerland. So it's a concept that's, it's bring the gap between if we can use that tools to, narrow down the distance between the producers and the consumers, I think everyone will have a much better understanding about what we could do. Because nowadays, we go to the supermarket, we pick up the stuff. If there's no tracing, information about those products, we have no idea about where those products are produced, what kinds of impact in those kinds of production it leaves. In fact, nowadays we do have much more information. We do have much more information about where those products are produced, in which kind of basis. So made this information available and have to the individuals, whether it's consumers or the producer, to understand their role. I think we will have much more ideas about what we can do as an individual. I just want to contribute to that. Thanks.
Jaana?
I want to thank the speaker about the reminding about the need for the adaptation strategies linked to the climate change. I should have mentioned that as well. When I described the situation in that part of the world where I'm coming from, where we are talking about ice and snow, and definitely the situation is not only for my country, but for all the region, and the regions play a crucial role. But I would welcome the more global discussion linked to the adaptation strategies, and especially because water is really the issue. It's not only how we try to prevent the climate change, but it is also how we adapt to the real situation, however effective we are. But the change is there despite of our good will and the technical availabilities.
Thank you. Lucas?
Maybe I also want to contribute to this climate change issue. I think definitely it's very important to adapt and to consider all the changes, but we are just now doing a study where we look into climate change impact on migration. So we do a survey in different parts of the world and look what is really contributing to migration. And I think climate change is really taken for a scapegoat for everything. And if you look, for example, into migration and climate change, it's everything coming first: economy, education, even relatives who are living somewhere else. I think we cannot blame climate change for all the negative effects we have in the world. And so I think it's also not, of course it's difficult if you have glacier melt and it's changing a lot, but I think we should not blame climate change as the only resource for conflict.
Thank you. Do we have more questions from the floor? Yes, please, sir.
My name is Massimo Cozzone. I'm coming from the Italian Ministry of Environment, and I'm currently chairing the UNEC Water Convention. So my question is from a WWF representative. He mentioned the upcoming entry into force of the New York Convention, and the UNEC Convention was mentioned this morning by the Swiss representative, also by others. And from our point of view, the scenario will change quite drastically in the next few months, because there will be from none to 2 conventions, 2 legal instruments globally for water management, for water protection. So from our efforts nowadays is to try to consider these 2 instruments that can be available to all UN member states as complementary and useful both as a package to choose from for countries according to their needs and priorities. What's your, let's say, perspective, and from our point of view, what do you think would be the role of these 2 instruments in relation to each other? So how do you see the future development of these 2 instruments worldwide? Thank you.
Thank you. I think this was the last question then.
Thank you very much. I hope I could address this question, but I'm not confident because I have colleagues who work on those 2 conventions. But my personal feeling is both conventions are very complementary to each other, or in the largest sense, actually, they are more or less the similar convention. And while ECE also, the convention also goes global, I think in the future, it's present us a much better opportunity to see how we can use these 2 conventions, both in the ECE but also in the rest of the world, to promote 2 conventions as the joint global architecture to promote water resource management. And I think it is still a long way for both conventions to be ratified by many countries. So the UN Water Convention only recently got 35 countries. I don't know how many countries ratified the ECE Convention. I think in terms of geographical coverage, I think there's a huge space that both conventions can really to reinforce each other to really become the global architecture when it comes to water governance. And I wouldn't say that's conflicting too, because many countries they already ratified both conventions, and they do see the complementary elements of the 2 conventions. Countries like Finland or Germany or Denmark, Netherlands, they already ratified both conventions. I think there are huge opportunity that we can seek much more collaboration in the future.
Thank you. I'd now like to come to an end to the session, and I would like to give each speaker just 1 minute and come up with perhaps one suggestion, one idea, one recommendation, one wish to the OECD, what in terms of water diplomacy the OECD could deal with and come up with. I understand us as being a part of an input exercise to stimulate a discussion about water diplomacy in the OECD, and perhaps, Lucas, you would like to start from your side.
Maybe I take the opportunity to answer the question about quality or quantity issues that was mentioned before. I think OSCE should rather more focus on quantity issues, because quality issues are much more a question of development and economic well-being, and maybe not especially focusing on conflict. So I think if OSCE can engage in more quantity issues, and in this respect also maybe connect to the European Union, the Water Framework Directive, I think that would be a good thing.
Thank you. Jaana?
I don't use one minute. I have always said that if there's a will, there's a way, and I'm convinced based on the discussion today that there definitely is will on this scheme as well. And I'm totally aware that there are definitely many ways. There's technical equipment, there is technical solutions, and if there's a way, it's only up to us to use them. And I think we need the science, we need the technical expertise, but we need also the governmental acceptance, and we need the NGOs to push those governments that have not been that active at this moment. So there's a will and there's a way.
Thank you. Minister Davlatzoda.
Thank you. The OSCE has good potential, and I think we need to use this potential in our region, and we are ready to work together with your office and to do everything and to do the better of this water management and security in the region.
Again, this is challenging to me. I think is that possible in the future that OSCE can continue to build this kind of dialogue and platform, and then have to raise the water on the political agenda? I think if you look at the political agenda, water is very, very low. It's not as high as it should be. Like Andras emphasized, if we talk about the climate change, largely it's also about water change. So is that something that OSCE can look at through this kind of platform, then input to the political agenda, to have to raise the water on the overall political agenda? Something. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you all the speakers for your contributions. Thank you and the floor for your questions and your remarks, and I wish you a good lunch break. Thank you.